You're listening to On Air with EUFOREA, inspiring the future of respiratory care.
Welcome to On Air, the podcast series of EUFOREA, and I'm very privileged to be here with you today and be accompanied by one of the popes in the field of rhinology and biologics in the real world, which is Professor Eugenio De Corso from Rome. So welcome, Eugenio, to have joined us here today on this podcast series. And today we'll discuss the EVEREST trial, which is kind of unique, but I'm willing to hear your impressions and your statements around why this trial is important, what it brings as a benefit to the clinical community as well as for patients. So welcome, Eugenio. Thanks for joining, and please share what the EVEREST trial is all about and how excited you are about these data.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think this is a very important trial because it's the first head-to-head trial. We had in the past data about comparison of the efficacy of biologics in the treatment of chronic rhinosinusitis patients with nasal polyps, EVEREST 1, but we didn't have direct comparison. We just have a network meta-analysis and indirect comparison, and we were looking for direct comparison because this is very important and finally say us which is the most effective drug in the treatment of this disease. And the EVEREST trial is comparing efficacy of dupilumab versus omalizumab, and it was running for 6 months, and we have the data and improvements of the two biologics in terms of reduction of dimension of polyps, improvement of quality of life, and improvement of asthma. And we also observed about the safety, and we had the data on the safety for both the biologics.
Do you think 6 months trial was sufficient long duration of treatment, and how data would be different or similar if the study would have been extended?
Yes, okay. It would be wonderful to have also long-term data and observation. But obviously, this is the first head-to-head trial, and I think it's enough to see the difference also because these drugs are working very well, and we expect an efficacy, our results, even in 6 months. This is important as well.
What was, according to your opinion and first impression of the results, the most striking result of this EVEREST trial?
This is a very important question. We presented the data the first time at the European Academy of Allergy and Asthma Immunology, and the perception was that the data were very impressive to the people listening our presentation. And we, in summary, presented the data demonstrated that Dupi was superior in terms of reduction of nasal polyp dimension that was measured by nasal polyp score, and the difference was significant at 6 months and in favor of dupilumab. And the improvement in terms of sense of smell as well was in favor of dupilumab. And the two drugs have the same safety profile, and this is very interesting. But I think we are lucky because these kind of drugs are very safe drugs. And we observe also some differences in terms of asthma symptoms improvement and lung functionality. And there was a little bit in favor of Dupi. That means that Dupi was superior. Okay, omalizumab was effective as well, but the trial is measuring the magnitude and the power in terms of efficacy. So we can say that omalizumab is effective as well, but Dupi has been demonstrated to be superior in terms of magnitude of efficacy.
How do these data then help you to choose the one over the other biologic when you're confronted with a patient with nasal polyp syndrome? On the basis of what criteria would you suggest or opt for the one or the other?
This is an interesting discussion, and we can discuss for hours, and you know that we can discuss for hours. In terms of what is important, about the choice of biologics. Okay, I want to extend this discussion to other biologics because, you know, the available biologics actually are three, and they are reimbursed and approved in many countries. But we will have other biologics as well. We are waiting for approval for dupilumab, for dupilumab. So this is a very challenging question because I think in the future we will be in trouble as well because the choice between all this panel, all these alternatives, needs a reason, needs a discrimination. Why we have to choose one biologics? Okay, actually, we cannot choose a biologic basing on the endotype because we don't have enough data for forcing the response. So actually, safety and efficacy are the best things and the best factor in terms of choices. And the efficacy is one of the best point. Another point is the efficacy on nasal polyps and as well on asthma, because the majority of our patients have comorbidities, and the most common is asthma. And you know that when you can have an improvement in both the condition with the same drug, this is very important for the patient.
Okay.
Also, effectiveness of comorbidities is important.
It's incredible. You can keep on talking about
Yeah.
these data. So it seems like you're very euphoric by the EVEREST trial,
okay.
and also the dynamics in the field of biologics. And by the way, I share your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
What I would like to have as a last question before we close this podcast on air series on the EVEREST trial is, why do you think comparative trials have never been top priority for companies nor for rhinologic researchers?
Okay, I think that such trials are very expensive and very demanding. I have been involved in the trial for 6 months, and the procedure were very demanding for all the centers. The rate of screening failure was very high. I remember 60% of the patients. So it's a very hard work, and it's very expensive. And obviously there are different reasons why a company can decide to do an head-to-head trial. But this is not the moment to discuss about the reason why a company want to start with a head-to-head trial. But we can imagine.
Yeah. I think the company that has supported this trial was very brave and most likely also convinced of the superiority of dupilumab over the other biologic.
Obviously, there were the literature evidence because the network meta-analysis were in favor of dupi as well.
Yeah.
But if you will look at the future, we will need other head-to-head trials because if we have all these opportunity, obviously it's quite difficult to choose which is the best one. Actually, I think we have the best data on dupi because the literature is quite clear, and we have nice data on dupi, but we have nice data as well on omalizumab and also on mepolizumab. And I think we need probably a discussion between experts in trying to understand if we can build an algorithm in terms of choice. But I think we need more and more data in terms of comparison to do such a very difficult task.
Well, I think that's a very nice concluding statement, and it fully reflects what EUFOREA's ambitions are. We also need to make sure that our colleague clinicians are not confused by the different treatment options, that they receive clear guidance on how to treat their patients in an optimal way. And therefore, I cannot hide my excitement about some of the initiatives that EUFOREA is currently elaborating, like the Biologics training course that will take place in London in March 2025, or 26, sorry, and also some other initiatives where indeed we will try to find and define guidance and criteria on the basis of which a certain biologic would be preferred over another one. So I do believe the future is very dynamic, but is bright at the same time. And I thank you so much for having shared your opinion on the EVEREST trial. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Today I'm very excited and euphoric of having with us Professor Philippe Gevaert from Ghent, all known to you because he was the driver of biologics in the field of CRSwNP and also undertook the first academic trials showing efficacy of biologics in CRSwNP. So Philippe, thanks for joining us and thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I cannot hide my excitement about the dynamism in the field of CRSwNP care. And I would like to know from your side how you consider the dynamics in the field and what are the challenges that we are currently confronted with.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think when I saw some papers coming out and I saw the results of biologicals having so fantastic effects on our patients, I thought, well, probably no one will be interested to make new biologicals that are coming up. And I'm really excited to see that science is evolving and that actually there is a lot of things in the pipeline for both chronic sinusitis with nasal polyps, but also without nasal polyps. So this field is really moving ahead now. We are kind of in a storm and it's going very fast, and I'm excited that it didn't stop. And that's the first thing. And I see that many new things are coming in.
If we then think of some novel scientific data coming out, there is the first comparative trial of biologics in CRSwNP. I wonder how you look at the data of the EVEREST trial comparing two biologics in real life.
Yeah, it's the first real-life study where they compare two biologicals, namely Xolair, it's an anti-IgE, compared to dupilumab, which is an anti-IL-4/13 receptor agonist. And I think it's really brave to compare both. It's not really a surprise what the outcome is, in my opinion, because Xolair is the old one. It's an old player. I think it's over 30 years old. And dupilumab is a newer and known as a better biologics for nasal polyps.
How do you think this EVEREST trial and the data coming out of it help us as clinical community to make the right choice of a biologic for the one or the other patient?
Well, I think head-to-head comparison trials are always important. You can look in real-world data, but there the inclusion is not always the same, reimbursement criteria are not the same. So real-world data is good, but real head-to-head comparison studies are better. And this shows us that dupilumab actually does a really good job. It's better in reducing nasal polyp size, in reducing quality of life, SNOT-22 symptoms. It's better in recovering smell for those patients. So in every aspect, it shows that dupilumab is better. That's not said that then anti-IgE Xolair is something we should forget. I think it's an old drug where we know that it's very safe, you can give it in pregnant women. However, if you have a primary nasal polyps, it clearly shows that dupilumab is the better choice. And on everything we measure, it's doing better.
If we look into the future with new biologics coming to the market, and if we also compare with the asthma field, where 6 biologics are available, how will we guide our colleagues from the ENT community to make the right choice for the right patient concerning the right biologics for their condition? I think this will be a challenge. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's good that we have a lot of choice, but also this is a challenge. And I think that EUFOREA is doing a great job by making clear guidelines where we explain for doctors who don't know or can't read every paper how to use them for which patients. And I think that's really important to have really simple guidelines for the doctors. And I think they work. If you look around, you see that actually also healthcare payers and providers, they use the guidelines to make their reimbursement criteria.
Just a final reflection of mine, and I know this is very challenging. Do you think we will ever be able to predict which biological will be effective for what kind of patients, based on endotyping, based on some of the proteomics or genomics that we currently do not invest sufficient time in?
Yeah, it's very interesting, your question. And 5 years ago, I would say, yes, we measure something and that will be the answer. However, today, because we have more and more efficient biologics, if you have a biologic that works in 95 or 90% of your patients, yeah, the number of non-responders is really little. So I think a trial and error probably in those very efficient biological is what we will do. And then an expensive biomarker doesn't make that much sense.
I couldn't agree more, but that will definitely be the future that we will be discussing also in the future based on novel research data that will come out. So thanks for joining us for this podcast on air, and also thanks to our honorary guest, Professor Philippe Gevaert from Ghent, Belgium.
This was brought to you by EUFOREA,